So, for any of you who saw my GDC rant last year, this talk is going to be very different. A little boy is scared. He is scared for his own life and the safety of his sister. There is a monster that is after him, a monster that hurts him. But this monster is a little different. This monster isn't always bad. Sometimes the monster is sleepy. Sometimes it's playful, even kind. This is Papo, a game by Minority. It is the story of a boy and a monster, except it's not. This entire game is a metaphor for alcohol abuse, the creator Vander Caballero's Monster of a Father. And it's one of the most touching games I've ever played. You start in a favela in Brazil, trying to find a shaman to cure the monster. But the monster is integral to you progressing through the game. You need its help. You can barely jump off its belly while it sleeps. You can have it open up new paths by smashing through barriers. You can also feed the monster fruit. But when you feed the monster fruit, the monster becomes enraged. The monster lives up to its name. A clear metaphor for alcohol, feeding the monster fruit, is sometimes necessary to progress, but it's also dangerous and scary. As you play through the game, you realize that you are complicit in the monster's addiction to fruit. You start to realize that emotionally, this game has weight to it, and that weight builds and builds as you play more and understand what the game is communicating through its dynamics. And by the end of Papo, I was sobbing profusely, unable to contain my emotions. I was a grown man breaking down in his living room. I've never experienced that gravity of emotion from media. You'd have thought I just found out someone close to me had died, and that's because it sort of happened. Papo didn't make me cry because of the arc of narrative or because it timed emotional music right. It made me cry because it asked me to do something seemingly simple. Let go. And then it made me let go. Not the character in the game. It made me, Manveer, let go. It made me remember my relationship with my estranged younger brother, the anger and hatred I had towards him for years, and remember his subsequent suicide in late 2011. It made me remember the difficulty I had consoling my parents as the only surviving child. It made me remember how sorry I felt for him because he suffered from bipolar disorder, a mental disease that often made him do and say things that ended our relationship. It reminded me how unwilling myself and society was to let him off the hook despite knowing this. Papo reminded me of something I already knew but have struggled with, the need to let go of anger, the need to forgive and look towards the future, the need to grow as a person and become better every single day, lest I be destroyed by a monster inside of me. I no longer play games to escape life. I play them to have experiences I couldn't have anywhere else in a safe space. I don't want to have to go through an abusive relationship. I'd rather just learn that lesson in that safe place. I'd rather be challenged to think about my world differently. I'd rather stand in front of a crowd of mostly strangers and open up the way Vander opened up to everyone who played his game. I'd rather start putting some of my own experiences as a person in the games I work on. I'd rather be vulnerable to the world. What's important isn't that the experiences are autobiographical, but rather that thematically they represent something personal. Because those experiences are so much more likely to capture something that approaches a universal truth that makes people feel differently. What's interesting about Papo is that it really does capture some amount of universal truth. I have friends who have had abusive fathers, friends who never knew their fathers, and friends with great relationships with their fathers all tell me they were moved to tears by the game. This doesn't happen if Vander isn't willing to showcase his vulnerability as a creator to the player. It doesn't happen if what he is trying to communicate isn't backed up with gameplay mechanics and a sense of complicity. It works in a way a book, a movie, or a TV show never would with me. And it's for these reasons that my only current interest in making games is the ones that have emotional resonance. Games that move players to reflect, consider, and emote in ways that they do not normally. To actually create mechanics and dynamics that realize this. And I hope more of you in this audience, no matter if you make console, Facebook, mobile, indie, or any other possible type of game, will consider putting this sort of emotional content in your game. It could be inspired from any number of sources that you want to draw upon. It could be from your personal lives. It could be from the stories you hear in the news, or just fiction. There are those of us that crave this sort of emotional content. It doesn't have to be sad either. It can be triumphant, inspirational, and full of wonderment, just like Journey was. And no, there's nothing wrong if your game does not have this, but not enough games do, so my options as a player are limited. There are so many interesting people in this audience who have led interesting lives. There's no way all of you are just interested in creating more power fantasies. And so for every single one of you who have in the past, are currently, or in the future will create a game that emotionally touches me, know that I love you for it. For your openness, your passion, and your inspiration. Sincerely, I love you.